Okay, so chapter 16, welcome to chapter 16. Chapter 16 covers evolution and diversity of plants. So there are two things that usually are covered for plants. One is evolution, how the plants came around, and the other one is physiology of the plants. So that's a different class, I think 4B, that you can take if you're interested in that. In this chapter, we're not gonna go into detail for that. We might mention one or two structures, but we're not gonna go and cover physiology of plants. So this chapter focuses on what plant is, where it came from, and then four major types of plants that we're going to go over. So if you were to, if you're interested in plants, I think it's a very good career path. You can be a botanist, you can work for a lawn company, you can work for a garden or a winery or orchard. So it's a very good career path if you're interested in that. And I would say take 4B if you want to learn more about plants. They cover that in detail. So plants, they came around about 500 million years ago. So that's an estimate, 500. So if you think about it, it's not that much. It's like blink of an eye. So here is the timeline we have. And then you notice this break here. This is billion years and this is million years. That means it goes far back. It goes really far back. So in the last chapter, I mentioned that green algae are the ancestors of the plants. So green algae, they were mainly in the ocean, and then over time started moving to the land. But because on the land there's gravity, it had to adapt and evolve different structures. Depending on those different structures, we put them in different groups, and we have four groups. So here, plants move on to land, and then they adapt and they evolve vascular tissue here. Well, I'll tell you what vascular tissue is in a few seconds. Then they started making seeds, and then they started making flowers. So those are the four groups that we're going to go over today. So let me just see if I can show you the timeline for this. Just trying to look for a picture here. So here's one. This is showing billions of years ago. I said plants came around 500 million years ago, which is not that long if you think about how long the planet Earth been around or when the life first started on Earth. So here is the Earth 4.5 billion years ago. And then the first cells, now we have the number, I think 3.8 or 3.7. It went up over time. So these are the first cells, the stromatolites, then turned into eukaryotes, then plants. It should be actually around here. This is in billions. This is 1 billion. That's not true. It's updated now. It's around 500 million years ago. So it's not been that long. It's compared to this timeline. If you had a ruler and that measured the time, it's not very long. It's compared to the life on Earth, it just came very recently. So major adaptations that happened in plants, one was the vascular tissue. Another one is making seeds. If it can make seeds, it can make food for the embryo. It can provide protection. And then making flowers to entice insects to do the pollination. If these plants have, either the seeds or they have the vascular tissue or they don't have the vascular tissue, we put them in different groups. And we have four different groups. Four different groups are bryophytes that are mostly mosses, hornworts, liverworts. They are non-vascular plants. If you notice that they don't grow very tall. And the reason is because they don't have this vascular tissue. It's like tubes that takes the water up. We have arteries and veins in our body that's taking, the blood everywhere. These don't have vascular tissue, they're non-vascular. So they don't really grow very tall. Once the plants had vascular tissue, they could grow tall. So they don't make seeds still, mostly foreign plants, but they do have vascular tissue, xylem and phloem. Gymnosperms are mostly cone plants. Gymnosperms are cone plants. They make pollen. They make pollen and seeds. Angiosperms, they have flowers and fruits. So those are the 4 groups we're going to go over to, probably not today, but in today's lecture and next time's lecture, we'll go over all these 4 groups. So bryophytes, like I said, these are mosses, hornworts, and liverworts. They are non-vascular plants. So there was this ancestral protista or algae. This is the ancestor green algae. Then it started getting on the land. So the first thing that the land plants developed was stomata and cuticle. So that's how it can take water in or carbon dioxide in, and it can do photosynthesis. These bryophytes, they don't have seeds or vascular tissue. Then the seedless vascular plants, they have vascular tissue that can transport water and nutrients in plants. And this vascular tissue can take water to higher heights, so it can grow tall. This cannot grow tall because there's no vascular tissue. Because taller plants can reach above the neighbors. They don't have to struggle for sunlight if you're tall compared to maybe you're growing in the ground and you're not that tall, and then this plant starts to grow over you. This is going to get most of the sunlight. So that's another adaptation, maybe to get more sunlight. So the seedless vascular plants, they have vascular tissue. I want you to, this is your vocabulary. I want you to know what the vascular tissue is called: xylem and phloem. Xylem is on the inside, phloem is on the outside. If I give you this picture, make sure you can label it. So xylem is on the inside, phloem is on the outside. Phloem is the one that's going to transport sugars. Xylem is going to transport water. Water is taken up by the roots and then it travels up. So xylem goes up. It's going to go up. Leaves, they make sugars through photosynthesis. So phloem goes down, takes sugars down from the leaves. So vascular tissue is going to transport water and nutrients. So those are the 2 vocabulary terms. Just make sure you know that phloem goes down, xylem goes up. One more thing I need you to know is called lignin. So lignin is found in, so it's the woody part. So you guys already heard about cellulose. It's going to give it some structure. Lignin is also going to provide some support to the plant walls. The reason it has lignin, the land plants, is because of gravity. So because of gravity, it needs to have a stronger structure, and that's lignin. So it's going to give that extra support because of gravity, and it allows them to grow straight up, this lignin, the woody part. Still, there are no seeds. So seedless vascular plants, that's the name, because they don't make seeds, they make spores. So modification in vascular tissue led to the evolution of seedless vascular plants. That's the group we have, mostly ferns. Then we had seeds. And the benefit of the seeds, I already said this, is going to protect the plant embryo, and it's going to give food for that embryo, which is also an adaptation. Seeds going to allow the parent, seeds going to allow to travel far away from the parent and germinate only when the conditions are favorable. So the seeds for the redwood trees, they can stay in ground. If you go to the redwood forest, you start digging in the ground, you're going to find a lot of seeds. They stay there until maybe fire comes along and kills all the large trees. Now it has more nutrients and it can grow, or until the sunlight becomes available, or until it rains. So they can stay there for a really, really long time, and they can germinate only when the conditions are good. Think about the coconut seed. So coconut has milk. That's the food supply for the embryo. It can drop somewhere in the ocean, maybe in Hawaii. It can float across the entire Pacific Ocean and land somewhere in California. Because it has that milk and it has that hard coating on the outside, which provides protection, it can live for a really, really long time. So this was a really good adaptation, making seeds. So gymnosperms are the plants that have vascular tissue and the seeds. So example would be a pine tree. So it's going to make cones, makes pollen. One thing I want to tell you is that it has to make a lot of pollen, like trillions of pollen to reproduce. And the reason is because most of that pollen doesn't end up in a cone. It has to rely on the wind to carry the pollen around, and it doesn't end up in the cone. So it's a lot of waste of energy. So it has to make lots of pollen. Whereas we have angiosperms, they have flowers or fruit that entice animals and insects. So they do the work of the wind. The insects can, carry the pollen to the other plants. So that was another adaptation that happened. There's a question for you guys before we move on. Newly discovered plant in a rainforest has vascular tissue and seeds, but no flowers. What is it?